Hey guys, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of Legends of Tomorrow Season 5 review series, and today I'm going to be talking about episode 4, Ahead of Her Time. And this episode had a bit of everything. It was funny, it was very light, it had a very shocking but dark ending, especially concerning John Constantine. This episode had it all really, and this was an episode, at least for most of it, we didn't see Sarah Lance. She went away to Star City for a little while and she left Ava in charge. Now, as we all know, Ava is not an experienced captain of the Wave Rider, so you can imagine the sorts of things that could happen if she was in charge, and it does happen, and more. So we see the Legends go back to the French Revolution, and we see Courtney Ford take on two different roles in this episode, so that was quite interesting. But I would say overall this episode was a lot of fun. I actually enjoyed this episode. I wouldn't say this episode was as good as episode 3, because I thought episode 3 was fantastic, but this episode still had some good stuff going on. But I enjoyed it, but I still think episode 3 is the one to beat. So, with that all said, let's get right into it. Let's talk about episode 4, Ahead of Her Time. So we start off this episode in Northumberland, where we see Gary and Charlie are standing outside the room that contains Astra's dead mother, with Gary deciding that he needs to go in there to save Constantine, though his attempt to use magic to open the door fails, only to knock out the doorknob, releasing the witch. Constantine finally emerges and asks Gary, "What have you done?" So this pretty much sets the tone for what is about to happen with Constantine. Meanwhile, on the Wave Rider, Sarah asks Ava to be in charge as the captain while she goes to Star City for a bit. Zari overhears this. Meanwhile, in Hell, we see Astra is playing poker, but her game is interrupted by a demon who is concerned about their losses thus far. She decides to play naughty and rips a necklace from her neck containing Constantine's soul coin. Elsewhere, Constantine and Gary deal with the ghost of Natalie and explain the real story about Astra and how Constantine botched Natalie's resurrection that led to all of this. Ray is on the phone with Nora when Mick interrupts. He's not feeling well, and it turns out he has feelings for Ali. Now, as we all know, Ali and Mick have a long history together, as we saw in episode 3. They were high school sweethearts, but I wouldn't really use the word sweetheart in the same sentence as Mick. So we see Mick is getting really sick, because he's not really sick, it's because he's developing feelings for someone. He's showing that he cares, and it makes him sick. So that was quite interesting, and we will learn more about Mick's history as we go along over the course of this season. Ava calls a meeting to try and set up a training of sorts in the style of the Time Bureau. The team, of course, are not having it. However, there's a time disruption during the time of the French Revolution, so the Legends decide to go off, and Zari even decides to join in because it involves dressing up, and it turns out that Zari is useful after all. She gets them beyond the guards and into the extravagant French party. At that party, Ray makes a very strange discovery. Marie Antoinette is the encore, but she also looks like Nora Dark. Now, this is where I said before that Courtney Ford takes on two roles, Marie Antoinette and Nora Dark, and you really get to see her strut her stuff and showcase how versatile she really is, and she really does a good job of playing this wacky French lady, and it's a lot of fun to watch. And if you have seen this episode, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's apparent that something is definitely off, and then the guillotine is wheeled in and Marie uses it to slice the cake. It turns out that the issue is Marie is killing the French Revolution with a non-stop party. Zari's plan is to lure Marie away by making her think there's a cooler party that she's not actually part of. Oh boy. Constantine goes on a very painful trip down memory lane, admitting that Natalie's resurrection was his idea. It's also revealed that Natalie and Constantine was in love, but he chose magic over her. Meanwhile, Charlie and Constantine argue. Natalie takes Charlie over. He admits that he loved her and he brought her back to prove that he was right to choose magic. Natalie says she thinks she has a way to save Astra. Meanwhile, Zari and Ava schmooze their way to Marie and lead her off, but the rest of the party tries to follow her. But Marie's head gets knocked off in the escape, prompting the legends to have to carry her to the Wave Rider in pieces. Ugh. After speaking with Marie's head, Zari peeks into the future and discovers that her perfume actually destroys people's sense of smell, ruining her. It leads Zari to discover that Marie's perfume is actually magic. Marie's body breaks loose and Zari steals the perfume for herself. At the perfume launch, Zari's DJ boyfriend, Small Money, proposes to her and causes the popularity of the perfume to spill all over her and people start swarming after her. On the Wave Rider, Marie's headless body gets mixed heat gun, and while at the perfume launch, Birad, Nate and Ava try to deal with Zari's situation. Birad hits people with a blast of air while Ava gets to Zari and they bump into a fountain, ending the perfume's effects. Mika and Ray stop Marie's body. Later, Zari eats a donut and has some flashbacks to her previous life. She and Ava become friends eventually. Natalie reveals to Constantine that the Loom of Fate is a real thing and not just a story. Turns out Charlie broke the Loom of Fate and scattered the pieces across the multiverse. In Hell, Astra tries to get Constantine's lifespan still shortened and does so in exchange for a favour. And the final shot we see of this episode is we see Constantine drops down dead, and that's pretty much how this episode ends, on a very dark note. I have to say, this episode, even though it had some silly moments, this was still actually a pretty good episode, and it looks like to me that Constantine starts to die, or he's going to be dying in this season, but time will tell how that will play out. But this was really good. This was a really good episode. As I said at the beginning, that some of it was a bit silly but a little bit light-hearted, but the ending more than made up for it, so there was a nice little balance, so it wasn't completely stupid from start to finish. And yeah, it was really good. Really enjoyed this episode a lot, and it really sets up episode 5 very nicely. So I'm going to wrap this up now. What did you think of episode 4? Did you enjoy it? What kind of fate do you think Astra has made for Constantine? Obviously it's not good, but what do you guys think? Also, do you think Zari will start to remember her old life and regain her old memories? And what about Mick Rory? Do you think that he will rekindle his old relationship with his old high school girlfriend? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will be back next time for another edition of the Season 5 review series, where I'll be talking about Episode 5. So until next time, take care everybody and stay safe.